Going to welcome to session number 20 of Genesis in Depth. I'm Dr. John McMath, joined here by my friends in Italy and in the Philippines. We've been doing this for several years now, and this is the high point of my week. I can tell you that much. We old retired guys have to find our fun where we can. And tomorrow I have the great privilege of traveling with Donna to the Philippines, where we'll get to see a lot of our friends in person. The problem with having friends on opposite sides of the planet is that it requires usually two separate trips, but we'll do that. Okay, today we're going to be in chapter 19 of Genesis. This is the continuation of a lecture that I started last week. Uh, so I'm going to back up a little bit and just rehearse what we did for those who might be joining just for this session. Uh, and I know that there are a number of people who do show up, as some 250 to 500 every week, who pop in on YouTube or Facebook. And I'm happy to be of service to those of you who find this useful. Okay, here we go. I'm going to see if I can share the screen. There we go. And just like that. Oh, there I am. Wow. Standing in front of the Dead Sea. Who knew? Okay. We got started talking about the destruction of Sodom, actually Sodom, Gomorrah, and the other three cities of the plain. The term here refers to the fertile plain of the Jordan in the time before Genesis 19, which is definitely within historical time. It's around 2000 BC, 4,000 years ago. The Jordan River would have started out in the mountains of the north, Mount Hermon and the surrounding mountains, flowed through the Sea of Galilee. And that if the Sea of Galilee had even existed then, that might be part of this, would have flowed all the way down the length of Israel into the Red Sea. After this judgment on the cities of plain, there is produced here a geologic wonder. Nobody is quite sure, amongst the secular geologists, how such a thing could happen, and yet it is. The the Dead Sea itself is at a level of 400 meters below sea level. So the water that flows into the Dead Sea can never get out. And that means that every day the water evaporates and the salt and other dissolvable minerals from upstream flows into the Dead Sea and can never get out. So the Dead Sea died. The water there cannot support life. It does, however, support swimmers. If you swim in the Dead Sea, you'll float like a cork. It's actually rather difficult to do anything in the Dead Sea except to lay on your back and try to keep your head out of the water. Uh, Drinking water from the Dead Sea will get you fairly sick. It's not fresh water. It's not usable water. Living around the edges of the Dead Sea are a number of animals who depend on freshwater springs, like En-Gedi and some others that are around the edge of the Dead Sea. Uh, so the surrounding area isn't quite dead. There are little bushes, shrubbery that grows in amongst the rocks, but pretty much it's a very barren area and a very, very small population, a few resort areas today where water is available. otherwise not. The description of how this geologic catastrophe happened is probably outside uh, our scope, but it would appear that at at the line of the Jordan River are the two plates, sandstone to the east and limestone to the west, separated. They just came apart, and the center part just dropped out of sight. And The Dead Sea is actually quite deep uh, because of that. A very interesting thing. I've always wondered why there's sandstone to the east and limestone to the west. Those are both sedimentary rocks. I'm not smart enough to have figured that out. Uh, but the geology here is unique in the world. There's no place quite like it. There are some other low places, like Death Valley in California, but this is a very very low place. Um, okay, when um, when the angels got done, chapter 18 of promising that they would be back in a year. The Lord Himself was in on this conversation. Back in a year, Sarah would have a son. The angels then described to Abraham what they were about to do with Sodom. Abraham bargained because he was afraid Lot might be killed or injured in this, and that, of course, was true. Uh, The angels finally went on their way. They arrived at Sodom, arrived at the gate of the city. Now, this is still early Bronze Age. The walls around Sodom would have been designed to keep animals out and give a certain amount of security to the area. These were not gigantic military defenses. It was more like the boundary of the outside of the city, something more than a fence. The walls would have been made of stone, usually 2 to 3 meters high, and so people could climb in if they wanted to. Uh, the early Bronze Age is characterized by very very stable politics and populations, and the idea of gangs raiding a city to take what they wanted had not really been invented yet to any great extent. The raid of the kings of Mesopotamia that we saw back in chapter 14 is one of the few examples of this kind of behavior. It was a small scale thing, and there was no siege. A siege would have been unnecessary. The men of Sodom and Gomorrah came out and met with the kings of Mesopotamia, and they had their battle out in the open ground. So the walls are not the big deal, but the gateway is. The gate of Sodom was the commercial center of the city. It was the core of the interior piazza. There's a square just inside the gateway of an ancient Near Eastern city. And this is always the same. And that piazza was the commercial center of the city. People who had things to sell, people who wanted to buy things would come to that area. Today, you can see this happening in many Near Eastern cities. This is a very common thing. It's like we call it the souk generally. But in the ancient world, people would come out. They'd spread out a rug and set out their stuff to sell. Maybe they made pottery. Maybe they had food that they were preparing. They'd set up a little grill and make kebabs, whatever. And that would happen in this fairly large public square. Now, something else that happened was that the visitors, travelers, could stop at a place like Sodom and find lodging for the night. There would be just an open area on one side with some cover overhead, There would be fodder for camels and donkeys. There would be water. There would be hay to make a bed for the travelers. It was actually not, it's not a bad option. And in most of the ancient world, this system provided a stable, predictable pattern for travelers. You bring your half a dozen camels, come right inside the gate, set up shop there, get your water, set up what you have to sell, or maybe buy some things from wholesalers there in town and continue on your journey. It's a it's actually a surprisingly efficient way to do business on a small scale. Really not bad at all. The gateway complex itself is the financial core. This is where the money changer would be located. This is where the city council, if there was one, would meet. The men of the city who had a seat in the gate would be the main players in whatever city it was. So in the gates of Jerusalem, you would find the same thing. This is not unique to Sodom. So the fact that Lot was sitting in the gate when the angels arrived means that Lot was not merely a resident of Sodom, but that he had bought entirely into the economic system of Sodom. He was, in the modern parlance, a player. He was in the business of making money from the economy of Sodom. Lot, therefore, certainly knew full well what was happening in Sodom. He experienced and saw the perversion of the men of Sodom uh, every day. This is not something the men of Sodom hid. This was not a frowned upon practice. This is what they did. So Lot, there in the gate, saw these two strangers who looked like normal men and welcomed them and insisted that they come home with him, which is an interesting thing because the uh, the public square in most towns and cities of the ancient world is a perfectly normal place for hospitality. That's just what that would be just fine. And he said to them, "Now behold, my lords, please turn aside into your servant's house, spend the night, wash your feet, then rise early and go on your way." And it's like, don't spend any more time here than you absolutely have to. Let's get out of here. And the two men, the angel said, "No, we'll spend the night in the square." And that is exactly what Lot didn't want to happen. Now, I'm not entirely sure what Lot knew about these angels. Perhaps he sensed a supernatural power about them. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure how much spiritual discernment Lot really can be credited with. Nevertheless, what happened? Okay, bargaining. My screen disappeared all of a sudden. There it is back again. Okay, so I'm not sure, but Lot recognized that this is not going to be a good thing. He urged them strongly, knowing that they would be attacked during the night by the men of Sodom. It's funny how evil comes out to play at night. Paul brings that up in the New Testament. You know, it is still the day, and the night is coming. Let's live in the light, not in the darkness. So he urged them strongly, verse 3, and they turned aside, entered his house. He prepared a feast for them and baked unleavened bread which is crackers, by the way, and they ate. Could be pita bread. Might have been kind of flexible, but unleavened bread, and they ate. Before they lay down, uh, the men of the city, men of Sodom, surrounded the house, young and old, all the people from every quarter. So a large crowd, very large crowd of the men of Sodom uh, surrounded the house. Uh, this is kind of an ugly scene. Typically, there would be one doorway into an ancient Near Eastern house. There would often be a way to get up onto the roof. Uh, the roof area would be in normal use. It would be possible, actually, to go from one roof to another and to get completely out of town over the roofs. But they didn't do that. They surrounded the house, and they called to Lot and said to him, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us that we may have relations with them." The Hebrew is considerably more explicit than that, uh, although it's not foul language. It's just they're talking about sexual relations, or specifically a homosexual relationship. The word sodomy, which is the defining act of the homosexual relationship, it comes from this event. This is such a famous thing that this is the defining term, uh, and this particular perversion uh, is singled out for uh, condemnation here in Genesis 19, along with other places in the Old Testament, and of course, most famously in the first chapter of the book of Romans. When you see any society that has reached its rock bottom, when it is as bad as it's likely to get, it will be a society that has embraced the various homosexual practices. When you start glorifying the LGBTQ whatever plus plus uh, practices, and allowing a privileged place in your society for that kind of evil, uh, the society is close to a collapse. It's close to a breakdown. And this is true everywhere in the world, always has been true. When we find these things happening, it's a part of uh, the corruption that inevitably breaks down a civilization. So the cities of the plain fell apart and were ultimately destroyed by God because of their evil practices. So the angels insisted on staying. Lot took them home. The men of the city demanded the visitors be brought out, but Lot begged them. In verse 6, uh, well, in verse 7, he says, "Do not act wickedly." He asked them not to do this thing. Do not act wickedly. Now, behold, I have two daughters who've not had relations with men. Uh, okay, two two young daughters that he's willing to give away to the men of Sodom. Uh, it's difficult for me actually to imagine how depraved a human being has to become in order to make an offer like that. It's a terrible thing, and the girls were there and understood entirely what their dad had just offered. This is genuinely a terrible thing. Uh, and the later on, we're going to find uh, that the girls had very little more moral fiber than their father. Anyway, it's a sad thing. The men of the city had no interest. They wanted the angels. Now, angels have the look of men. When they show up in the world, you're going to have trouble discerning that that angel is not just an ordinary person. I believe that angels can show up in whatever guise they'd like. Uh, if for convenience sake they want to come as a hippopotamus, I suppose they could. But they in the Bible they normally show up as men. It is entirely possible that they could show up as women. Uh, in either case, they would be genderless in the sense that none of the plumbing would be there because none of that is needed. The angels don't have children, no baby angels in heaven. Uh, and I can only imagine what kind of a surprise the men of Sodom would have been in for had they tried to actually attack these two angels. It would not have been a pretty scene. Let's just put it that way. Uh, as it works out, it's not very pretty. So I've got, I've got a couple of daughters. Do to them whatever you like, only do nothing to these men as they've come under the shelter of my roof. So the law of hospitality is an important thing. Uh, he offered the daughters, and the men of the who are in the house uh, are listening to this whole thing, and the men of Sodom said, "Stand aside. This one came in as an alien. Already he's acting like a judge. Now we'll treat you worse than them." So he pressed hard against Lot, came near to break the door. So they're getting ready to break down the door. This is a riot. This is a this is really bad. But the two men reached out their hands, brought Lot into the house with them, and shut the door, which demonstrates significant courage and also power on the part of these angels. And at that point, verse 11, the angels struck the men who were at the doorway of the house with blindness, both small and great. And they wearied themselves trying to find the doorway. The animal drive of these men is a little astounding. If I suddenly became blind, I would most likely forget whatever else I was up to. If I'm trying to write a sermon and I suddenly become blind, I would quit trying to type. I would try to find out what had just gone wrong. Um, but these men continue with this riot, this attempt to break down the door, and this is not good. And so the two men ask, and this is a very, very important question, a very, very important question, verse 12. The two men said to Lot, "Whom else have you here?" Very important question, because Lot has been there for 20 years or so. He's been there a long time. He's been there long enough to raise a family, establish a business, get to know the people around him. Certainly, as a believer, and we know from the New Testament that Lot is called a righteous man. He's righteous by the grace of God alone. You can see in Lot's life that as a believer, he's a very, very immature person. Nevertheless, uh, here he is, and as a believer in a place like this, he should have been establishing some kinds of relationships with people in that city that would lead them also to faith in God. That the point of being wherever you are is to establish a witness there. That's the purpose Uh, God doesn't make mistakes, and He doesn't put us places randomly for no good reason. We are where we are so that we can carry on a ministry amongst the people that we find ourselves with. It's always true. And here we are. We've got Lot in the midst of Sodom, and the two men said, "Who do you have here? A son-in-law, maybe, or your sons and daughters, whoever you have in the city, bring them out of the place. For we," verse 13, "are about to destroy this place because their outcry has become so great before the Lord. The Lord has sent us to destroy it." So now we find that these angels are not just messengers, they have the power to do tremendous damage. When we look at the damage that has been done geologically to this area, this is done by a pair of angels who are sent by God. And if you think you could successfully wrestle with an angel, this is maybe you need to think about that again. Uh, so we're going to destroy this place. So Lot, verse 14, went to talk with his sons-in-law, okay, who were to marry his daughters. Okay, they've already been betrothed. The ancient practice in a village economy was for arranged marriages. When children were little, uh, they were set up to be married to somebody who would be appropriate for them, and that these arranged marriages often worked out very well because marriage is marriage, and over time you do learn to love whoever mom and dad chose. It is the way it actually works, and nevertheless, there was an arranged marriage. There were a couple of sons-in-law. You would think that Lot and his wife, if they were believers, and we know that Lot is spoken of as a believer, that he would have shared at least with the sons-in-law. And they were there, and he said, "Up, get out of this place. The Lord will destroy the city." Yeah, that's a fairly important message. It's also a really, really serious message. Destruction is about to hit, and you've got minutes to run from this place. But he appeared to his sons-in-law to be jesting. They thought he was making a joke. They had never heard their father-in-law speak about the Lord before. Now that tells us that's really a sad piece of news. That's a very sad thing altogether. I and it's hard to imagine, and yet this is exactly what the Bible is describing. These young men had no idea what he was talking about. They thought he was making a big joke. Unless your behavior and your language and your conversation is mature and spiritual most of the time, the people you talk to are going to be surprised when you suddenly ask them about the Lord. Uh, if you're going to bring it up, you've got to earn the right to bring it up. Um, Lot had never done that. He never had done that. So they thought he was joking. Lot ended up losing the sons-in-law. Uh, the next day, that next morning, Lot escapes, verses 15 through 20. This is the area around the Dead Sea. I expect that it was somewhat nicer in the pre Sodom times, but this is the area. This is actually the place where the Kidron uh, Valley Creek comes down to the Dead Sea. So the morning dawned, and the angels urged Lot, saying, "Up, take your wife and your daughters who are here, or you will be swept away in the punishment of the city." So this is uh, this is urgent. Up now, we've got to run. But he hesitated. That's verse 16. But he hesitated. What is the problem with this guy? He's face to face with two angels who said they're going to destroy the place and have already demonstrated their power. And he hesitated. He didn't want to leave all of his piles of stuff. And the men seized his hand of his wife, and the hands of his two daughters, for the compassion of the Lord was upon him. Okay, it's a pure mercy thing. Lot did not earn the privilege of being saved from Sodom. God had to reach in and grab him and drag him out of the city. They put their hands on him and they brought him out and they put him outside the city. Verse 17, when they had brought them outside, one said, "Escape for your life. Do not look behind you. Do not stay anywhere in the valley. Escape to the mountains. You'll be swept away." Okay, this is serious. From Sodom, the mountains would have been several miles away. This is going to take some serious running. I'm guessing that Lot and his wife were not runners. that, that their most recent exercise had probably been lifting their coffee cups that morning. But escape for your lives. You'll be swept away. This whole place is going to be destroyed. But Lot said to them, "Oh no, my lords." What? Gee whiz. This is a really bad thing. It's about to happen. And we find Lot hesitating yet again. Behold, your servant has found favor in your sight. He recognizes that. Interesting, Lot uses the word for favor or grace. This is chen. And you have magnified your loving kindness. Now, that's another important word. Chen is the very important theological word grace, the provision of resources that the sinner could never provide for himself. So Lot recognizes that he is a beneficiary of the grace of God. He also recognizes that he is a beneficiary of God's loving kindness. That's the Hebrew word chesed, H-E-S-E-D. Chesed is God's loyal love, the kind of love that sticks, that holds on, that never gives up. That's a very, very important biblical theological concept. It's the basis of the New Testament doctrine of the perseverance of the saints. Why is it that believers remain saved even if they do bad things? Well, it's because of the loyal, loving kindness of the Lord, the chesed. God simply doesn't let go. And you've shown this to me by saving my life. But now at this point, the but is completely unnecessary. He needs to give up on this. Uh, but I cannot escape to the mountains. The disaster will overtake me and I'll die. Now behold, this town over here is near enough to flee to, and it's small. Let me escape there. Is it not small that my life may be saved? Okay, and this would be the little town of Zoar. The angels agreed to him. Uh, Behold, I grant you this request also, not to overthrow the town of which you've spoken. But hurry, escape there. I can't do anything to arrive. And the name of the town was called Zoar. Okay, so this is going to happen. They're running for Zoar. And the sun had risen over the earth when Lot came to Zoar. Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. Brimstone and fire is interesting stuff. Uh, it's the usual description of, well, among other things, is a description of hell. That the terms are used often enough in a volcanic eruption. Uh, Very significantly, I think, the Dead Sea Valley has no indications of volcanism. Now, in the north, in the Golan Heights, which are on the east side of the Jordan River Valley, very significant. All of the Galilee is volcanic. So the eruption of the volcanoes may well have been in the north. And a big part of this geologic event was the splitting of this Rift Valley. The Rift Valley in through which the Jordan River flows runs all the way from Syria near the near the Euphrates River, is not too far from there, north all the way north of Damascus, all the way south down the length of Israel to the Gulf of Aqaba. Continues on south into Africa and continues all the way to Victoria Falls in Central Africa. This is one of those places where the layers of the Earth's surface can be seen, and the feature is big enough to see easily from space. It's a major geologic feature on the face of the Earth. And I believe that it happened at this time. There's volcanic activity along the full length of the Rift Valley, but interestingly, not here in the Dead Sea Valley. Uh, Still, that's what happened. Fire and brimstone, he overthrew those cities and all the valley and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. And then verse well, the rest of it, this gets sadder and sadder as it goes along. And he overthrew the cities, but his wife, who was behind him, looked back and became a pillar of salt. As Lot is fleeing toward Zoar, there she is, and she just couldn't leave without going back, maybe to grab the doilies or something. She just couldn't live without this. Uh, Lot had his own little Sodom there in Zoar, and he had his daughters with him. Now, we don't know exactly how the wife became a pillar of salt. If you ever visit Israel, you will see the little pillars of salt that grow in the Dead Sea. And the guide may try to tell you that that particular little pillar of salt over there is Lot's wife. Not likely. Or that a rock formation up on the side of the hill is Lot's wife. Obviously, we don't know, and it's impossible to know. The salt in the Dead Sea forms pillars overnight when there's no wind. If there is any wind at all, the salt pillars don't form, but it's often windless along the Dead Sea. So Abraham rose early in the morning. And this is bad. We've got Abraham witnessing all of this. And he went to the place where he'd stood before the Lord and looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah, and the land of the valley, and he saw, behold, the smoke of the land ascended like smoke of a furnace. It came about when God destroyed the cities of the valley that God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow when he overthrew the cities in which Lot lived. So, in a large way, Lot was saved because of his relationship with Abraham. Um, so Lot went up there from Zoar, and we're going to go down through verse 35. Oops. Hi. The story doesn't improve from here. Um, Lot went up from Zoar. He stayed in the mountains. His two daughters were with him, for he was afraid to stay in Zoar. He stayed in a cave, probably something like this one that I'm standing in taking this picture. And he had his two daughters there with him, mentioned twice, interestingly. Then the firstborn said to the younger, Our father is old. There's not a man on earth to come in to us after the manner of the earth. Come, let us make our father drunk wine, and let us lie with him, that we may preserve our family through our father. So they made their father drunk wine that night. And the firstborn went in and lay with her father, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. Following day, the firstborn said to the younger, uh, I did this last night. Let's make him drunk, and then you go in, that we may preserve our family. And so they made their father drink wine that night also, and the younger rose and lay with him, and he did not know what was going on. Thus both the daughters of Lot were with child by their father. The firstborn bore a son. They called his name Moab, and he is the father of the Moabites to this day. As for the younger, she also bore a son, called his name Ben-Ammi. He is the father of the sons of Ammon to this day. The Ammonites and the Moabites are today uh, part of the much broader mixed race that we call Arab. Uh, like Ishmael, these are primarily nomadic people groups who established some cities. There were some cities in Moab and cities like Ammon, Jordan, that belonged to the Ammonites. But mostly these people were nomadic. They were shepherds. Uh, and the characteristic of both Ammon and Moab is a persistent hatred for the Jewish people. They will oppose Israel's passage on the way back into the promised land 450 years later, 500 years later. Uh, the uh, the enemies that Israel has in the neighborhood are in one way or another related to uh, Abraham and to the patriarchal family. When we get to the birth of Isaac, we're going to find out also that we've got a brother named Esau who will be cheated out of his birthright. And we're going to then find uh, uh, this tends to be an ugly thing. Uh, Jacob and Esau are going to produce uh, another whole group of people uh, that we call the Edomites, or even further south, also nomadic peoples. They live in the desert and are going to continue to be a problem for Israel down to the present day. Uh, I will not say that the group that likes to call itself Palestinians are all descendants of Ishmael and Moab, uh, but they're a part of this larger body of uh, mixed race, mixed background, wandering nomadic peoples who inhabited the fringes of the great Arabian desert throughout much of history, and who today are Muslim. Uh, the the ongoing war in Israel dates back to these events. I think it's important that we recognize the essential unity of this entire session. This story of incest with the daughters is awful, but the continuing hatred of these people groups for Israel seems to be a biblically foreordained punishment for Lot's bad behavior, for Abraham's bad behavior, for the brokenness of the patriarchal family. So it's not a pretty thing. When we examine the overall uh, life of Lot, it's a kind of a sad story. I mean, it really is a sad story. If you think about the cost of a carnal life, there's some application here. The first of all, maybe not the most important, but the saddest thing, is that Lot lost his capacity to bear witness. He could no longer be an effective witness to the truth of Scripture. He was a joke. And his sons-in-law didn't even believe he was being honest with them when he told them about the destruction about to come. Secondly, he lost everything he'd ever worked for. His entire career came to an end here. Everything, whatever commercial interests he had, all gone. All of his trading partners dead. The city, the house, everything he had was gone. He lost his entire family. For all practical purposes, his wife had been long gone. She was committed to the stuff that she left behind in Sodom. Uh, his daughters uh, were undoubtedly long gone. They had no moral sense, no ethical values. Uh, they were gone. He laid the foundations for centuries of suffering for Israel. If we go through the annals of the Old Testament, you'll see all the times in the Old Testament where either the Ammonites or the Moabites are an implacable enemy. And we see them there. The Philistines come late to the game, and the between the Philistines and the Ammonites, you see a kind of a pincers movement punching Israel from both sides. The Moabites were difficult, the far side of the Dead Sea, throughout all of Israel's history. It's one of the most disgusting episodes in the Old Testament is recorded at Moab, where the king of Moab, a fellow by the name of Mesha, was fighting against Israel, and Israel had come and besieged his town. And the king of Moab uh, sacrificed his firstborn son on the walls, and the men of Israel went away disgusted to think that anyone would do such a horrible thing. Uh, these are stories that make a bold statement in the Old Testament. You know, the brokenness of Abraham's family comes into stark relief when we see what is happening here. Now, this isn't Abraham's fault, but recognize that this family isn't perfect. We're not dealing with a cast of plaster saints who sit on our dashboards. Uh, these are these are real people with feet made of clay, who, in the hard parts of life, uh, make bad mistakes, and yet Lot is still spoken of as a believer. Uh, he may have lost his last shreds of self-respect when he realized what had happened between him and his daughters. He must have been ashamed the rest of his life. But, and I'm going to emphasize this, Lot did not lose his salvation. There's a spot in the New Testament. Now I've forgotten where it is. I always, I hate it when I forget get a verse, but there's a spot in the New Testament that says, "Yet he will be saved, even as by fire." You get into heaven with the smell of smoke on your clothing. Um, some people just barely make it in, but they make it because of the grace of God. Lot didn't lose his salvation. Lot's sins were so grievous that many people would say, "Oh, well, he obviously lost his salvation." But the Bible makes the point that he did not. Uh, how righteous and faithful was he? Well, not very. But that's not the point of salvation. Salvation is a gift of God. It's an act of the grace of God. It's a result of the loving kindness of God. And Lot understood that he was saved by the grace of God and kept by the loving kindness of God. And with that understanding, even having made a grievous error, he can go on. That this is the last we ever hear of Lot is not surprising. He never amounted to anything biblically. Um, that's too bad. So, kind of a sad story. When we get out of here, we're going to get, and I think I'm going to quit for now because I want to do, maybe I won't. Maybe we can do this real quick. In chapter 20, we're going to start off in chapter 20 with just this brief thing, and I don't know, maybe I should. This is kind of an interesting little story uh, because we've got a group at Gerar in uh, the southern part of Israel, uh, and we don't know exactly where Gerar is, but Abraham does the same thing. She is my sister, and actually, it would appear that uh, Sarah actually was Abraham's half sister, same father, different mother. The Philistines is the name that is given to the people who live here. The Philistines of Gerar are actually the righteous Gentiles here. The Philistines are the good guys in this story. Uh, and Abraham said of Sarah, "She's my sister." So Abimelech, the king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. Now, interestingly, these people are called Philistines. One of the theories about the origin of the Philistines is that they came from the Greek islands, particularly after the Minoan civilization fell. And that's a possibility, I suppose. But all of them that we run into have Semitic names. They're names that are like Hebrew. So Abimelech means my father is the king in Hebrew. So we don't know. But God came to Abimelech in a dream, said to him, "Behold, you're a dead man because of the woman you've taken, for she's married." And Abimelech had not come near her. He said, "Lord, will you slay a nation even though blameless? Did he not say she's my sister?" And she said, "He's my brother. In the integrity of my heart, the innocence of my hands, I've done this." Then God said to him in the dream, "Oh, yes, I know that you've done this in the integrity of your heart. And I've kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I didn't let you touch her. Now, therefore, restore the man's wife, for he is a prophet. He will pray for you, and you will live. But if you do not restore her, know that you will surely die, you and all who are yours." So Abimelech arose early in the morning, called his servants, and told them all of these things. And the men were greatly frightened. Abimelech called Abraham, said to him, "What have you done to us? How have I sinned against you, that you brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin? You've done to me things that ought not to be done." And Abimelech said, "What have you encountered? That you have done this thing?" Abraham said, "Well, I thought there was no fear of God in this place, and they'll kill me. Besides, she actually is my sister, daughter of my father, but not of my mother, and she became my wife. And it came about when God caused me to wander from my father's house. I said to her, this is the kindest you'll show to me everywhere we go. Say he's my brother. So Abimelech then took sheep and oxen and male and female servants, gave them to Abraham, restored his wife Sarah to him. And Abimelech said, behold, the land is before you, settle where you please. And Sarah said, behold, I've given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It is your vindication before all who are with you, before all men, you are cleared. Abraham prayed to God. God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maids, so that they bore children. For the Lord had closed fast all the wombs of the household of Abimelech because of Sarah. Okay, odd little story. Now, the reason I've read the whole chapter, I want to make one point, and that is that this is similar to the event in Egypt, where Abraham said to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's man, Sarah is my sister. That is the place where the similarities end. For many, many years, the critics have insisted that this story is actually a copy, a doublet is what they call it. The actual thing probably never happened, but they tell the story twice because it makes a point. Uh, if you compare the two stories and just compare them verse by verse, you'll find there are virtually no similarities. The bit about the sister, the bit about the king not taking advantage of the situation, the righteous Gentiles, and those things are true. But all of the names, all of the places, all of the details are different. The entire narrative is different. These are two separate stories. Abraham really did this twice. Later on, during the life of Isaac, it's going to happen again. It's a very bad idea. Uh, the point being made here, and it's a point that I've been repeating because it's so important, is that in spite of his relationship with God, Abraham was never, ever perfect. He struggled with sin throughout his life. This is normal. Uh, we're all going to struggle with sin. If we stop struggling, then we've got a problem. We should always fight whatever sin is left. Uh, I like to hope that all of us can make progress during our lifetimes. And most Christians do. I suspect Lot didn't make much progress, but most of us do make significant progress. Abraham, maybe not so much. Maybe there's some areas where he just never quite grew up. Uh, we should try to improve. But our salvation does not depend on our perfection. Our salvation depends on the grace and the loving kindness of God, because God intends to save the world through a broken family. And that's what this whole story is about. Kind of it's a hard way to say it, but that's what it is. That's what we've got going on here. I'm going to end for the day, and there will be no session next week because Donna and I are leaving for the Philippines tomorrow morning. We get on the airplane at 9:51 in the morning tomorrow. And we're
Okay.
predestined for Clark Field, so we're heading there. Bye bye, everybody.
Goodbye.
It's
Bye,
fun to
everyone.
see
You
everybody.
don't
You
want to
guys
say
give me
goodbye,
guys
Deborah?
are such a kick.
Do you want to come over and say
Ciao,
goodbye?
ciao, ciao, tutti.
Good.
Ciao,
Okay, come on,
tutti.
Deborah. I won't end things
Deborah, come
until
here. Come here,
Deborah has a
quick.
chance to say goodbye.
Okay, wait. She's doing her schoolwork. You want to
She's
say
doing her
goodbye?
schoolwork, and so there we have. There's Mama. Oh, there's Deborah.
Bye,
Hello,
Deborah.
Deborah. Okay. All right, everybody. Bye bye.